Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2025, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Accessibility Cloud and Intopia. You can follow us on Mastodon and Blue Sky, and if you have any questions for the presenter, post them using the ID24 hashtag, or you can use the YouTube chat. We'll gather your questions for our Q&A at the end of the session. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. I'm delighted to be joined by my guest host, Hayden Pickering. Hayden, over to you.
Hello, I'm getting some audio feedback, but yeah, I'll continue anyway. Yeah, so when I first saw this talk title, I thought to myself of something that my dad keeps saying to me, which is more haste, less speed. And I proved him wrong by doing a lot of things very quickly. But the thing was that I ended up doing them at a very, very low standard. And I feel like this talk might be addressing some of those issues. So this is Hannah Wagner, and Hannah Wagner is going to be talking about design as care, building what speed alone can't deliver. So take it away, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Hayden. And thanks all of you for joining me for my talk about design as care, building what speed alone can't deliver. I'm Hannah Wagner. I am a white, petite woman in my 30s with blonde shoulder-length hair and glasses, and I live near Detroit, Michigan. I've helped both automotive and government agencies develop accessibility practices from scratch, and I've founded a new company called Common Threads Consultancy, and we help local municipalities develop accessible digital practices. First, this talk explores how to foster an environment that allows for inclusive design. And in building this presentation, I've discovered it's quite a large topic, so bear with me. We'll start with some overall theory and trends, and then move towards more practical insights. I'll also be talking about this topic from multiple levels, so business, team, and individual. Hopefully, no matter where you are in your career, it'll be applicable to you. Let's get started. When I first submitted this talk to Inclusive Design 24, I noticed that workers in tech and knowledge sectors have become increasingly frustrated and overwhelmed, and I wanted to explore that. I began with two seemingly opposing mantras. Of course, the Silicon Valley move fast and break things versus if it's not accessible, it's not done. One requires us to move fast at all costs. The other asks us to get it done right. It got me thinking, is it even possible to do both? Is innovation fast or slow? Is being a disruptor a long-term strategy? So I started mulling over whether there was a good example of using both speed and care together. And this is what I came up with. An egg race. If you're unfamiliar, essentially you put an egg on a spoon and you race other people to the finish line. And it really requires both speed and precision. So if you go too fast without control, the egg will fall and you'll have to start over. So essentially, if you're moving fast as possible within the constraints of not breaking the thing you care about. And I think that's really the crux of what we'll talk about here. Through this presentation, I found that inclusivity and care really aren't the opposite of speed. They're what makes speed purposeful and sustainable. Startups can usually afford to break a few things because they're still figuring out what they're even building or who they are. They're kind of the teenager of the business, not yet planning far into the future. But once a business matures, knowing what they're building, who they're serving, care becomes critical to success. It helps you move faster in the right direction. So really this becomes a discussion of care as the next step in maturity. So for example, a startup speed, the primary values would be, short-term profits, speed, short-term optimization, acceptable collateral damage, and often high risk. Whereas a more mindful or strategic speed would value trust and quality, have a more sustainable velocity, and the speed would be within your values and in service of what you're building and who you're building it for. So let's look at a case study for when speed becomes damaging. In 2013, the US federal government launched healthcare.gov. It's an official national website for the health insurance marketplace. It happened around or launched around the time of the ACA, and it helps individuals and families shop for, compare, and enroll in health insurance plans. Pretty important. But the deadline became more important than whether the system actually worked for real people. When it launched, the site crashed constantly. It couldn't handle all the traffic. It wasn't fully accessible, and citizens waited hours only to lose their progress in enrollment. The reality was hours of frustration and failed attempts. So there's really two lessons here. When you move fast and break things, you often break accessibility first. And also, trust is your most valuable long-term asset. When moving fast might meet your immediate timeline, you might also be breaking trust with users, which will sacrifice your future for a short-term gain. When we talk about speed, we also must talk about productivity. And when it comes to understanding productivity, time scale matters. When you think of the world's greatest innovators, you might not realize just how long it took for them to get there. Da Vinci worked on the Mona Lisa for 16 years. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony spanned over 30 years. Lin-Manuel Miranda took nearly a decade to finish his musical In the Heights and 7 years for Hamilton. And it took Charles Darwin 20 years to develop the theory of evolution. Great ideas need time to incubate. Why? Well, our brains work better when we're not rushing. Neuroscience says that forcing innovation under high pressure typically leads towards familiar solutions, not novel ones. It also can cause a good enough mentality. It can cause us to act on hunches rather than asking questions. It can hinder our own learning, and we can become mentally depleted. This relentless focus on speed and productivity can unintentionally stifle deep thinking and even prevent real innovation from happening. And this is where I want to remind you, you are a renewable and also a limited resource. This duality is important to acknowledge and at the heart of a sustainable practice. Rest, sleep, vacation, putting your phone down, restore your capacity, and are part of being productive. And also, you are a limited resource. There are real boundaries to what you can sustain over time. Burnout happens when we treat ourselves as if we're infinitely renewable. And from a business perspective, if you're still in sprint mode after 5 years, something's wrong. Just like if a person tried to sprint a marathon. Companies that never mature past their startup mode burn out their people, and that ends up hurting the company. Burnout leads to decreased productivity, reduced satisfaction and well-being, increased turnover and costs. It undermines innovation, collaboration, trust, financial support, or financial performance. And burnout culture is actually a very biased system. It disproportionately favors specific demographics. Surprise, surprise, white, financially stable, able-bodied men who are also not caretakers are better equipped to survive or even thrive in this culture. And self-care really doesn't fix the root of the problem. Collective care does. And when we understand that each other's success is also our success, that is where the real growth happens. To further this point, let's talk about two elephants in the room. Pseudo-productivity, which is using visible activity to measure productivity. So if your boss goes around to make sure that you're looking busy at your desk, that's pseudo-productivity. And doing more with less, so pushing employees into larger workloads. We need to stop the charade of working intensely all the time. It's artificial and it's unsustainable. Pushing employees into larger workloads can decrease both the quantity and quality of what they produce, increasing technical debt and costs to fix it later. Why are we measuring it this way? Well, it's easier to measure focus than it is to measure creativity over time, in a time scale that's feasible for business reports. You can't take 20 years and then say, hey, this person is really productive that came up with this awesome idea. That just doesn't translate into quarterly financials. So we've all seen this. Successful companies with billions in revenue whose leadership still acts like they're coding in a garage. Using that we're a startup mentality or that phrase as permanent justification for careless practices. And just like we're concerned about a 35-year-old still acting like a teenager, we should be concerned about a 10-year-old company still acting like a startup. There's a big scale of impact. When you have millions of users or customers, breaking things breaks real people's lives, not just prototypes. So why do established businesses feel pressured to act like teenagers? Wall Street rewards growth over sustainability and short-term gains over long-term health. Silicon Valley's move fast culture has become really like a default business aspiration. And companies get this fear of irrelevance. Like, if we don't act young and agile, we're going to become dinosaurs. Acting like a startup when you're not prevents you from accessing the actual advantages of your life stage. I want to be extra clear. I'm not anti-startup. I'm pro-evolution and pro-intentionality about when and how to make that shift. So about that fear of irrelevance. Maturity isn't about moving slower. The goal is to move with purpose, direction, and sustainability, to sprint when it matters and think when it counts. So don't let FOMO get the better of you. So let's talk about exactly what is careful design. My definition that I've put together is creating with intention and purpose, applying serious consideration to getting it right, and maintaining genuine commitment to serving and ensuring the success of those our work affects. Design really must change from being unintentionally destructive to being intentionally constructive. Intentionality ends up being the guiding star here. It provides the why and the what that define which risks are worth taking and how speed should be applied to them. So let's look at another case study. This is a good case study. Nintendo definitely got it right. While gaming competitors in the 2000s raced to build the most powerful consoles, Nintendo chose a very different path. They chose to really try to understand what makes play meaningful. And this is what separates companies like Nintendo from companies that just got comfortable and ended up fading away. Nintendo didn't just sustain, they kept innovating thoughtfully. They mastered their transition to maturity, and they weren't wrong to move fast early on, but they were smart to recognize when that approach had limits. Nintendo regularly just delays releases to ensure they meet their own standards. And instead of chasing technical specs, they focus on inclusive and intuitive design. The Wii succeeded because anyone could pick it up and play. Grandparents and grandchildren could play together. Their easy to learn, difficult to master philosophy makes games accessible to newcomers while rewarding dedicated players. So the lesson is, when you understand your users deeply and design with intention, you don't need to move as fast to stay ahead. You create something sustainable that competitors struggle to replicate. And I love Shigeru Miyamoto's quote here. He's Nintendo's game director. A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. Another great example is right in my my metro area, Detroit's agrihood. So when Detroit faced massive vacancy and food deserts, community organizers chose deep engagement and long-term thinking. They created America's first sustainable urban agrihood. They designed with residents instead of treating neighborhoods as blank slates that need outside expertise. They address multiple challenges simultaneously: food access, economic opportunity, community connection, and environmental health, rather than just a Band-Aid solution like a food bank. They were able to grow and distribute over 50,000 pounds of produce to over 2,000 households within 2 square miles at no cost to the recipients. It's a community-led process. It's inclusive from the start, and it's built on the strengths of the community. When you take time to understand complex community needs and design with rather than for people, you create solutions that last. Inclusive design isn't just about individual products, it's about building systems that work for everyone. Okay, so a lot of theoretical talk. How do we make careful design practical, especially in the current tech culture? First, what we'll kind of do the business, teams, and individual breakout here. So business. First, let's figure out how to identify a speed that could be damaging. Some green flags would look like not rushing your most important work, moving fast only on clearly defined problems, using Band-Aids only with improvement frameworks. So if you're like, hey, we can't actually finish the whole of this now, you better have a plan to improve it later. And then speeding up within established guardrails. So like design systems, ethical frameworks, there are areas where you're able to easily speed up. And then red flags may look like accumulating technical debt, not having a clear definition of done, your teams are burning out, sacrificing accessibility or user research because there's just no time, and a will fix it later attitude becomes really the default response. So now, if we've identified the damaging headwinds, how do we help leadership recognize it's time to mature the business? Well, we reiterate it isn't about being slow, it's about adapting intelligently over time. So first, reframe the language. Care helps us make smarter decisions. And then also maybe change up the language. I know care doesn't resonate to some business executives, so maybe switch the word for intentional or strategic. And then also, we want to connect to outcomes. So if you connect it to stronger brand reputation and trust, better innovation, higher employee retention, reduced rework, those things can help bolster the argument. And then also smart versus reckless risk. So care enables decisive action towards known opportunities, not just guessing. And research accelerates clarity. It doesn't slow you down. Okay, next, ask different questions. These are the types of questions that support the highest outcome. Instead of asking, how fast can we ship this? We ask, what approach supports the highest outcome? Instead of asking, what's the minimum viable product? We ask, who are we leaving behind? Instead of asking, what do we think will work? We ask, what do we need to know to make the best decision? Instead of asking, how do we disrupt the market? We ask, how do we serve the ecosystem? And then lastly, at this business level, change the metrics. When human activities become just numbers, we lose the context and meaning that actually drive sustainable success. Excuse me. So we need to combine metrics with stories. Measurements give facts, stories provide the meaning. We should be measuring individual growth, meaning comparing people to their past selves, not each other. We should value contribution over output. So for example, one of your employees may have really quality work, but they work slower. And another person may work really fast, but maybe lack in the quality. Does that mean that one should be valued over the other? Not necessarily. They each contribute different strengths. And then also ask what environment others need to succeed before resorting to performance improvement plans or PIPs, as many people in the US may be familiar with. Essentially, there's a quote by Alexander Den Heyer that's, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So changing some of those metrics may help you make that environment better for or more conducive to inclusive design. Okay, so let's look at teams. The disability justice movement is an amazing example of care practices. They were a force to be reckoned with, and yet they moved as slowly as their slowest member. And this persistence, this commitment to not leaving each other behind is something we can learn from, especially as teams. Move at the speed of trust. Are you really moving as a team if you're competing against each other? Also, work in seasons. Your brain is not meant to work at full capacity nonstop. Working in seasons has been something that we've done for centuries in agriculture. You have your summer months, you have your winter months. Base camp has 2-week cool down periods after their 6 to 8 week work cycles. So that allows people to kind of regroup after a more intense period and prepare for the next intense period. Automotive industry also, like industry-wide, has shutdowns the first week in July and the week between Christmas and New Year's. So it kind of has this like 6-month or 6-month stint of working and then a forced vacation. Like everybody is off, which is really, really a wonderful way to not feel that pressure of like, oh, I'm away from my work. So when I think of push and pull workflows, for the push workflows, it automatically makes me think of I Love Lucy, and that clearly is dating me. But there's this episode, it's very well known, where Lucy and Ethel are working at a chocolates factory, and the chocolates keep coming in faster and faster. And I don't recall whether they were taste testing or what, but it gets out of control and chaos ensues. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want that push of work just flooding us. Instead, you want more of a pull strategy, which the best example I can think of is the agile methodology or using Kanban boards where you're pulling work into your workload as you're able to. Yeah. And then lastly, specifically for team leaders, here's some things that you can do to help cultivate more careful practices within your team. First, protect your team. Shield them from overload and unrealistic expectations. Monitor for burnout signs and intervene early if you can. Create backup systems so no one person is indispensable. And implement no meeting blocks and focus time for everyone. I know many companies have like no meeting Fridays, or there's many ways to do that. Second, model the behavior. So leaders, take your breaks, eat your lunch, and take vacation time visibly. Avoid sending emails at night or on weekends, and show that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them. And then third, create supporting culture. Make space for honest feedback without retaliation. Recognize and reward sustainable practices. So I know often the people that get a lot of recognition may be somebody who hustles hard and gets something done and works extra, but it's really important to commend the people who are really good with their time and good with quality and kind of the opposite of that too. We want to make sure that we're showing that that's also important. Then also prioritize your team's well-being and encourage time off and cover for people when they're gone. I was on a team at General Motors that was really so great. If anything happened, somebody was in a family emergency, everyone else was like, go, we will take care of it. And that sense of security and care is so empowering. Just remember, their success is your success. Okay, now for the individual level. Make some room for deep thinking. Curiosity and mind wandering are good for creativity, and focus is good for getting things done. And that's the big downfall of pseudo productivity. It's attempting to measure only our focus side. Incubation is really hard to measure, but engaging in curiosity, paying attention to change, and letting your mind wander can be powerful tools. So we need to integrate incubation into our schedules, and that can look like building learning time and incubation time into your project timelines. One of the books I read actually said double your timeline, and I almost put it in this presentation, but then I was like, people are just going to scoff at me because I know that that's so hard to do unless you maybe own your own business. But if you can even expand it just by a little, that will help. Also, especially in the age of AI, automate tasks that are dull, dangerous, or dirty. So if you're a creative person and you're, working on inclusive design, you should be using your brain for the inclusive design part. Have AI do all that rest of the dull, dangerous, or dirty stuff. Your brain's going to atrophy if you don't use it. So make sure that you're offloading that tedious cognitive load. And then, of course, change your physical location to spark creativity. so many of those people that I mentioned earlier that are historically great innovators would go on walks regularly. It's kind of funny how many of them would do that. And then also give yourself permission to wander and wonder. Okay, and then set clear boundaries. So apply limits at mission, project, and task levels. Don't just um, set a boundary for one type of work you're doing. Keep meetings to half of your day or less. So use a one for you, one for me strategy where, if somebody makes a meeting on tomorrow for you, you block off some time to work as well. Use office hours or docket clearing meetings to batch interruptions. So instead of having somebody ping you all day, if you can batch it into a meeting, that helps a lot. And then also create a sacred space from pseudo productivity. Find a space that allows you to really get deep into your work. Sometimes that looks like working remotely for people, so that you aren't performing your work. You're actually getting deep into it. And then lastly, policy change. I know sometimes corporations and work practices can seem bigger than we're able to change, but we are not helpless. We can change tech culture through policy. Support organizations advocating for employee protections. These can create guardrails that make these sustainable work practices standard, not exceptional. There's a few ones that I've been paying attention to recently. Strengthening restrictions on layoffs, so disconnecting them from stock buybacks and bonuses. Also expanding advance notice requirements for when layoffs happen so that, those employees that are affected are warned in advance. And then tying executive compensation to employee well-being metrics. There's a lot that we can do in this area. And I think we sometimes forget that that's an actual thing that can actually get work done. So be reminded you can make change, especially in policy. All right, so before I bring this talk to a close, if you want to dive deeper into these areas, I've asked the Inclusive Design 24 team to post these books that I'm sharing on the screen, just in case you guys want to dive into some of the things that I've been talking about. They've all been super interesting and very, very helpful. And then to finish up this discussion, here's what I'm asking you to do. Take these frameworks back to your teams. Start these conversations. Help your organizations grow up because this work matters, not just for business success, but for the kind of world we're building together. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was great.
Thank you.
And I should manage expectations for people who are noticing all of the books being pushed into the chat. I did that. I couldn't make them wrap the way that I wanted, so I'm sorry. But they're all in there. There's at least a bullet separating each of the pairs of books in each of the comments. Okay, with that out of the way, now that I've apologized for ruining your reveal a little bit, Hayden, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many notes, honestly. Like, this is the thing about ID24 is that you get such a diversity of talks, and it's in the spirit of the event, I suppose. But I was kind of not expecting this particular topic and to be articulated so well. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going to use my privilege here and ask a question myself. So the thing that I really took away from it, which I was thinking about a lot, is this idea of this move fast and break things, agile methodology, that old chestnut. And I've thought about this quite a bit before anyway, but I always felt like, and this might be kind of a revisionist way of looking at what they meant by that terminology, but move fast and break things to me I always thought of it as being like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, so you instead of like being precious about stuff. Go ahead, make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And I felt like that was in a really kind of inclusive and kind of supportive philosophy around software development or whatever it's applied to. But I think that that idea got co-opted by people and it got turned into, oh, break things? Yeah, we like to break things. Let's smash stuff up. Let's form a company that sells flamethrowers or whatever you're inclined to do. And then that got me thinking about how there's this really big ideological divide between the kind of the first group of people, which is like, let's try and innovate, let's try and move things forward, and let's be supportive of each other, and this other group of people who just want to basically dismantle society. And I guess the question is, and it's a big question, and I'm sorry, and it's a really difficult one, but it's something that's like troubled me for a long time, is um, how do you find like the first group of people among what might be the other kind of people, I suppose. So,
Mm.
what are sort of like early warning signs that you might be joining an organization of people who are more of the we're going to do fascism, but in like a tech way, as
Yeah.
opposed to people who are actually like, yeah, we don't mind breaking things, but we're going to fix them again, and we're doing it for ultimately for good.
Yeah, no, this is excellent question. I would say one of your first signs is it's the moving fast at all costs. When you get to the all costs, then you start neglecting things that you should be caring for. So really it's that maybe a good sign or a green flag would be um if a company has guardrails and allows you to, make some mistakes and like that's great. It's just when there's no guardrails and then you're just pushing forward at all costs, that's where things fall apart.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, if it's sort of, I suppose if it becomes evident that breaking things is actually the goal rather
Right.
than
Right.
rather
Yeah.
than part of the process. Yeah, and yeah, I guess you could quickly pick up on that. I would like to think so anyway. Yeah, that's great. And there was another question, moving quickly on from my question there. This is from an Adrian Roselli. I don't know if it's the Adrian Roselli. It'd be amazing if it was, but it says, is there a simple argument to offer to bosses or investors who come from the lean startup model of rapid iteration? So an
I,
argument kind of against that, I guess.
hmm. So I think that that's a great call out because I don't think rapid iteration is the problem. I think rapid iteration is actually part of that um, giving you time to incubate ideas. It's okay to move fast, but you need to be able to actually give yourself time to pivot. I think companies often like to think that they're, oh, we're rapidly innovating, but then they aren't willing to actually pivot when the signs are telling them, hey, this is not the best highest outcome. They, if you're saying, well, let's ship anyway, like that's when it becomes problematic.
Right, and so that was a sort of a major tenet of the agile methodology is the idea that you could easily like pivot, you can change course, right? That was kind of the
Right.
point of it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the time what we're seeing more is just do the bad idea that we've sunk cost into faster, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
like break things indefinitely, yeah, absolutely. That's all I have, I think, unless Adrian, do you have anything else? Um,
Well, no,
fantastic
you
talk.
you probably shouldn't have asked that terrible question from that guy named Adrian, because I'm
He
sure there
was
was
in there
far more
trolling
context he
and
wanted to stuff in there and, didn't make any sense on its own. Although, for what it's worth, I do appreciate you calling out the notion of pivoting, Hannah, because many times there are people who come from that, Eric Ries's model and are like, oh, we really like this product, we're going to anchor on it. and they'll pivot there, but they won't pivot on their process when they recognize or fail to recognize that their process is burning people out and setting them on fire.
Right. Yeah.
For real.
Yeah. You really have to be able to walk the walk, not just talk the talk when it comes to the pivoting part. And it's, I will admit it's hard to do when you get, emotionally attached to your ideas,
Yes.
or, you're on a schedule and then you suddenly realized, oh no, we're gonna have to change everything. Like it's not an easy thing to cut your losses. And I mean, it's not really even cutting your losses. You're just choosing a better path. But um I can understand where the hang up is there. It's not necessarily easy, but
Yeah.
really I do think that fast iteration and agile in its truer form actually does work well with inclusive design and care design. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't
Sticks a little
assume that by
closer.
break fast, I mean all
Yeah.
of it, because certainly there's good things about it too.
I think a lot of what you're saying is sticking closer to the original Agile Manifesto anyway.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I would agree. Yeah.
And but for context, I'm looking at this with a background of having a startup background myself, a long period of it before I got better. So, hearing these things is nice.
Yeah.
Do you think that like that I'm asking you questions now.
No,
Do you think that this is reflective of some of the things that you have learned since you have been doing startup for a while?
I I left that whole race, and I think the things you're saying are both familiar. I
Mhm.
think they're messages that we've heard before. I think they land well with somebody with my background. So it's
Sure.
very nice to hear them. Um, and part of the reason I asked that question is because I still see people out there being ground down by bosses who want to have a startup culture within a larger entity, or by people who've, done their startup weekend and now they got an investor who's giving them a pittance and they think it's the world and they're going to grind themselves into dust. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons why I appreciate your talk is you're acknowledging there are other ways to do this and your examples, your agro villages,
The
I'm sorry.
agrihood, yeah.
Yeah, like I love that. I love that. And the concept of seasonal, et cetera, it tracks, it fits with some actual experiences. We mentioned, we discussed before I'm from Buffalo, so I have a very seasonal mindset. So
Yeah,
so thank you
absolutely.
very much for putting all that together and framing it.
Yeah.
Thank you for
The
letting me do
aggro
it.
thing is fantastic because it's like it just made me think of the web itself, right? So it like we've there was like a boom and bust thing, like Detroit was suffered from that, and then got abandoned, laid to waste, like neglected, and
Mm-hmm.
then you've got this grassroots thing growing up, and that to me is like an analog of the web. You have these big sort of corporate centralized like social media and things like that, and in some ways, among those things, you've got these little crops of grass growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other last words of wisdom for us, Hannah, based on our terrible comments and questions?
No, they aren't terrible. No, I think I've covered it pretty well, or at least I hope I
You
have.
did.
Thank you
You
so
did.
Oh
much.
yeah.
And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys next year.
All right. Well, then I'm going to
Right.
do our outro, and this time I'll try to follow the script properly. So, if you, dear viewer, liked this session, mash that YouTube like button, and don't forget that you can subscribe to our channel, and that will keep you in the loop on any of our future events. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our Platinum supporters, Accessibility Cloud and Intopia, Silver supporters, Intuit, Bronze supporters, the Law Office of Laney Feingold, Mantis and Company, and Vispero. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session, and I fully expect to see you then. Thank you.